Hello, I'm Matthew Gavidia. Today on the MGH Life Sciences News Network, the Center for Biosimilars is pleased to welcome Dr. Ryan Haumschild, Director of Pharmacy at Emory Healthcare. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at Emory?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ryan Haumschild, I'm the Director of Pharmacy Services here. My role is pretty extensive, oversee all of our infusion pharmacy services for our Winship Cancer Institute. It's a comprehensive cancer center, as well as our non-oncology infusion centers that deal with pulmonary, dermatology, gastroenterology, rheumatology, and Center for Viral Hepatitis. I also oversee our specialty pharmacy services, our clinical practice model, our 340B program, and then finance for the department.
Can you describe the Emory Healthcare system, particularly the type of healthcare offered and the number of providers and territory covered?
Yeah, so we're a large integrated delivery network located in the Southeast. We have a large patient pool since we're located in one of the biggest cities in the US. We have 11 hospitals in our system, and typically with providers, we have over about 2,000 providers, and we have a number of affiliates that work with us. So, relatively large system with around 22,000 employees in total.
What is the extent of the use of biosimilars prior to embarking on a program to broaden use? Is there administrative interest in greater use of biosimilars?
So initially, when biosimilars came to market, I would say there was a lot of people that were skeptical. What does this mean for us? What does it mean for our program? And really, we didn't have a huge uptake at first. The only time we started to use biosimilars were really in our growth factors, and mainly just because insurance started to require them. It wasn't something that we were choosing to use initially. The administrative burden of biosimilars is a little bit more difficult just because you have to carry many different products on hand. And especially with us having so many infusion centers across the greater Atlanta area, that's really my team responsibility to make sure we have enough inventory on hand, but that we're also reducing our carrying costs and keeping our inventory turns within finance's goal range.
What were the rationale and the strategy that led to your decision to do the survey?
So as biosimilars came to market, we realized we couldn't just sit back and not partake. We recognized that some patients were being forced to use biosimilars. And so if some patients are being forced to use them, we need to evaluate the safety, the efficacy, and the appropriateness for all of our patients. And so that really led us down the path to figure out how do we start this. And I think the first method that we decided to utilize was doing a baseline survey, really surveying our entire faculty through the College of Medicine and also our providers that practice in clinic, both APPs and PharmDs, to figure out what is everyone's comfortability, what are their hesitations, and then what are the concerns that we need to address on the front end before we start to ramp up use.
What exactly did the survey findings tell you?
So I would say initially survey findings were people are hesitant. A lot of people weren't sure what to do. They wanted other people to utilize them first. A lot of people felt comfortable with their brands and the medications that they've been practicing with for the longest period of time. So there were hesitations there. The other question is, do we really have to move forward with this? And there seemed to be just a lack of education, even though we have some of the top providers in the country. I think that lack of familiarity, and because they maybe weren't on the clinical trials, they had some hesitations, especially with the expedited approval pathway through the FDA.
What goals did you develop based on those findings? And can you describe your action plan for moving forward with these findings?
Yeah, so want to get the baseline satisfaction of physicians working with these products. And our goal was to increase utilization. We actually had an internal marker to see, can we at least get above 30% utilization with biosimilars? At the time, there was OPPS, reduction in reimbursement. And so biosimilars had a better reimbursement pathway. And so we recognize not only is it important to recognize the value and efficacy for our patients that are being forced to use them based on payer preferences, but at the same time, how can we increase our utilization to control the total cost of care for our patients? And then the other thing we wanted to do was get an understanding of how we could improve the baseline understanding from providers and patients, but then how could we set a goal of what is provider preference, and can that preference be changed to biosimilars as we move forward with our education strategy?
How can these initiatives be implemented? Were there any challenges you encountered and subsequently overcame?
There were challenges. I feel like a lot of providers were open to biosimilars, but maybe just for new starts, they didn't want to have any interchangeability. A lot of providers wanted to still have their preferences, and biosimilars could be an option if insurance dictated it, but they still wanted to use brand initially. And so those are some of the barriers we had to work through. We had to work through reimbursement, telling the story of reimbursement that we can still get paid for utilizing these medications. There's still an option for patients, so they don't have an increased out-of-pocket expense. Even looking at some of the real-world data and talking with our European colleagues to see how can we utilize and leverage their experience with biosimilars and translate that into our comprehensive cancer center. And lastly, one of the barriers is we're known across the country in the Southeast for providing the best cancer care possible. And so we had to ensure that our outcomes would stay the same, if not better, if we started to incorporate these biosimilars use within our health plan and our cancer center.
What do you think was achieved through this program, the difference that it has made, and the goals that lie ahead with respect to achieving greater use of biosimilars?
So I would say the goals for this program, so we've started to increase biosimilar use. Providers have been on board, and I've got to tell you, we've had some great physician champions that have helped utilize biosimilars, had evaluated the impact of biosimilars, and even got it to where we got through P&T that pharmacy really has a huge influence in utilization of biosimilars, and even establishing a collaborative practice agreement with our physician providers so that we can make those switches as necessary. I think even having biosimilars as the preferred formulary agents, depending on the disease state, is also a huge win. And so I think that's really where we've been. I think the future is how do we continue to incorporate biosimilars, not just within oncology, but our non-oncology disease states? How do we leverage more real-world data? And we're actually looking at what some studies we can do internally to validate that biosimilars have not changed outcomes and really make our physician colleagues more comfortable. And lastly, where I see things coming, I'm sure you may be seeing this too, is we have affiliates that sign on within our cancer center and within our health system, and they really don't have a lot of education or resources to learn about biosimilars. And so now I'm trying to leverage our data and our experience to tell that story of success with others.
Do you feel that the trepidation you encountered among physicians toward biosimilars is still largely a feature of many healthcare systems in the United States?
I really do. As much as some of us large IDNs have been able to get through the barriers of biosimilars, I still see a lot of hesitation, especially with our community providers that may practice here occasionally and are credentialed to practice in our infusion center. I find that they may be hesitant around biosimilars. Some of our affiliate sites that don't have a large research program or a super strong pharmacy presence there, there's a lot of hesitation. And initially, they have a lot of pushback. And so that's really what I've tried to utilize our experience here to stand as a platform to tell others and educate others, because I feel like there's a huge opportunity for biosimilars that's really untapped in a lot of the community health systems.
Do you feel that the lessons and strategies at Emory can be successfully employed elsewhere?
I really feel that they do. I mean, obviously they have to be customized. We're lucky in that we have a number of PGY1, PGY2 board certified clinical pharmacy specialists. We have a very engaged and experienced administration and leadership team. And so that gives you a lot of internal equity with your physician providers. They trust you. You've earned that respect over time. And so I obviously think that's given us a leg up. But I do think that we can leverage the experiences we've had with community health systems and make it applicable and help them with their transition. And that's something I'm really committed to. I think it's really important for the patient. I think it's important for the total cost of care. And it helps health systems pivot a little bit better when insurance companies start to dictate biosimilars to begin with and takes the choice a little more away from them.
And lastly, would you like to share any other thoughts or conclusions about this effort?
I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I talk about our story of success. I think we're starting to migrate into the non-oncology biosimilar space. Again, we have a large volume of non-oncology infusions that also deal with biosimilars. And so we're leveraging our experiences with oncology to non-oncology. And I see biosimilars obviously breaking into the specialty pharmacy and non-infusable area. And my goal is not to just be 100% biosimilars, but at least give us the option to and help people recognize that real world data. And make them feel comfortable even with interchangeability, even if it may not be labeled that way. So I think there's a lot more steps to be taken, a lot more education, especially with our affiliate providers. I see this is still probably about a 2 to 3 year journey, but I'm excited to be on it. I'm excited to be on the cutting edge of it and actually having pharmacy taking an active role through a collaborative practice agreement and really choosing the end product.
To learn more, visit our website at centerforbiosimilars.com. I'm Matthew Gavidia. Thanks for joining us.